Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Daryl Gilbert, President of Premier Supply Chain Services.
Good evening. I'm Daryl Gilbert, President of Premier Supply Chain Services, and it's an honor to welcome you tonight. Welcome over 4,200 of you to the 2014 Premier Breakthroughs Conference and Exhibition. Our attendance this year sets new records and includes members, suppliers, experts, guests, and Premier staff. And we're grateful for your support and are looking forward to 3 days of valuable education and networking opportunities designed to help you manage the business of caring for your communities, especially at this unique time in healthcare. Of the over 4,200 attendees, we have approximately 500 contracted suppliers that are represented. And if you are a supplier and you wouldn't mind standing, I'd really like to have you stand at this time so that we can recognize you, because it's through your continuing support. That's right. It's through your continuing support that we're able to convene all of these critical stakeholders during this event. So members, we hope that you'll get a chance to interact with them. And we also want to encourage you to visit the trade show tomorrow and Thursday, where you'll have a chance to connect with these suppliers around contracting ideas, innovation ideas, and what have you, and the things that are most important to you. And through our commitment to transformation, Premier creates innovative solutions that support, again, the business of caring. Our goals are continue to work with you to make the healthcare supply chain efficient and effective, to drive continuous improvement in cost and quality, and to integrate data, creating knowledge that facilitates improvement. And to underscore that commitment, our conference kicks off tonight with a strong focus in this area around innovation. First with our speaker, and then second with Premier's Innovation Celebration. Tonight's speaker, Dr. John Kao, is chairman of the Institute for Large-Scale Innovation and the CEO and founder of EdgeMakers. John's a leading authority on innovation, business creativity, organizational transformation, emerging technologies. And he's been a trusted advisor to senior leaders in both the public and private sector. His breakthrough ideas are expressed in his 2 books, Jamming, The Art and Discipline of Business Creativity, and Innovation Nation. John's also published 3 ebooks. He received his BA and his MBA from Yale University and his MBA from Harvard. He was also a member of the Harvard Business School faculty, where he served from 1982 to 1996, and where his elective courses were some of the most sought after in the university. Drew over 200,000 plus MBA students, and his executive programs drew executives from AT&T, Merck, and Merrill Lynch. Please help me welcome Dr. John Kao.
Good afternoon. So last year I was in Australia, or actually I was entering Australia, when I had an unusual experience. They have these immigration forms with the blank occupation, which I sometimes have difficulty filling out because, I've been an MD, I've been an entrepreneur, I've been an academic, I've been a professor, I've been a film producer, a Broadway producer, kind of a avocational rock and roll musician, and I'm probably forgetting a few other things. So every time I fill out this blank, I do it truthfully, but I do it differently. And this time, I decided I would write the term innovation activist. It was a long flight. I had a lot of time to kind of get creative. And as I approached the immigration booth, there was a gentleman there who was kind of like a central casting, large government bureaucrat. And I gave him my immigration form. He looked at me, and there was a long and very uncomfortable silence, after which he said, "Is this some kind of subversive activity?" And I quickly realized that I was kind of on the line here, and that if I wanted to get into the country, I'd better, kind of revise my story slightly. So I said, yes, I'm here to work with, the Prime Minister's office, and you have an innovation strategy in your country, which you, sir, are an integral part of, and he let me in. But the thing that struck me about that was that I get this very fortunate opportunity all the time to put myself on the line for innovation. If I just look at the last 6 weeks, I was on a Virginia-class nuclear submarine doing advisory work for the U.S. Navy. Then I went to London and I did some work for Al Gore's Sustainability Private Equity Fund. I was in Brazil last week, meeting with several hundred teenagers who are passionate about learning about innovation and entrepreneurship. I facilitated a workshop of leaders in medical diagnostics who are trying to think about what the medical diagnostics field is likely to look like over the next 10, 15 years. And now I get to be with you. So my life is a constant variety show, but the theme is innovation. And I've been working in the innovation field broadly defined for about 30 years, 30 plus years. So I've kind of seen the good, the bad, and the ugly of innovation. And I want to share the good parts, the good parts with you. To do that, I actually have brought some innovation with me. There are a lot of people out there who can talk about innovation. This is what I call the hand waving. They say, innovation's really important. Did you know that? It's really, really important. If you don't have some, you better get some. Did I mention that it was really important? So that kind of gets you only so far, right? But the idea that we could bring innovation and put it on stage and have a shared experience of it, and then use that as an opportunity really to try to understand how it works, and even make a connection to the kind of arguably innovation ecosystem that you all are a part of in terms of this network of formal and informal relationships and co-innovation activity that's about this whole phenomenon that's brought us all here today. I mean, that would be a very interesting and probably worthwhile topic to cover. So some of you know, it wasn't really part of the introduction, that I have this thing for music. And music actually turns out to be a very good metaphor for innovation, and in a way that I hope to demonstrate to you in a very kind of time-efficient way. So here we have a piece of sheet music. This is sheet music. How many of you play a musical instrument or sing or know about music to some extent? Wow, quite a few of you, maybe 35, 40%. So I have to explain to the rest of the audience what you know, which is this is the instruction set for music, and these little round things are notes. So they kind of, this is Chopin, right? Chopin Prelude, dedicated to Mademoiselle so-and-so. Very stylish guy Chopin was. And so the black notes, the black circles tell you where to put your fingers on the keys. The little asterisks on the bottom of the staves, I guess you'd call them, are where Chopin's saying, okay, piano player, put your foot down on the damper pedal, now take it off, right? And then it also says mezzo forte, which means loud, but not too loud. Agitato is kind of the mood, right? So really the job of the musician in this scenario is to play the notes the way Chopin wrote them, not to create new notes. So in a literal sense, there's no creative job description in delivering this Chopin prelude. I mean, of course, I'm making an exaggerated point. There's creativity and interpretation, but in the literal sense of creating new notes, that's kind of verboten, right? But there is another kind of music, which I think is a great illustration of the principles of innovation, and that's jazz. Now, I could also be talking about Indian ragas or klezmer music or the blues, but I've chosen jazz because it's what's on my mind these days. And let me just illustrate a couple of points. This is a very famous song by a guy named Antonio Carlos Jobim called Wave. I was just in Brazil, so Brazil's on my mind. How many of you know this tune? Not too many. Okay. Well, I'll use this as an illustration anyway. And it's not, the value of the illustration doesn't depend on your knowing the tune. So if I went to the music store and I had this piece of sheet music up on the music stand here, this is kind of what it would sound like. Pretty boring, huh? Dry. But I don't know, maybe some of you liked it. So I could play it again. I'll vary the expression, I'll kind of change the phrasing a little. Anyway, you get the point. I have no freedom to create new notes. The music is kind of the control system for the performance. And in fact, notation was developed in order to preserve performances, just to give you a little musical history, because they didn't have, digital tape recorders. So, notation was the answer. But notation is the constraint. It's kind of like people in, the command module of some organization doing the strategic plan, and then everybody else is kind of in the orchestra in a way, the old-fashioned way of doing business. But remember this melody. So I'm going to play the tune a little differently. I'm going to play the tune, then I'm going to improvise based on creating a new melody in the moment without thinking too much about it. Hopefully it'll sound good for you. Melody. Thanks. So that was kind of the, abbreviated form because, it's nice to kind of get into the groove and improvise. But for our purposes, that was an illustration of improvisation. None of those notes were written down. I didn't rehearse them. I wasn't thinking about them. I find that the more I think about what I'm going to play or, the more I think, well, gee, there are like 1,000, maybe 1,500 people in this room. There's a lot of people. And I start to get the inner dialogue going. The music deteriorates in quality really rapidly. That, being in that state of beginner's mind and being open to whatever it is that's going to happen up there is the key ingredient. And it passes the test, the literal dictionary test of what is innovation, which is creativity, right? New notes, applied to some purpose, in this case, musical pleasure, beauty, aesthetics, whatever. Creativity applied to a purpose to create value, right? Nobody ran out of the room with their hands over their ears, although I'm guessing this is a pretty polite group. So I'm demonstrating up here a capability for innovation, but in order that it doesn't seem like some abstract skill that, only someone who really loves jazz and works on it for a long time can do, and sort of what does this have to do with me kind of stuff, I'm going to propose that we invest 3 or 4 minutes in a very simple exercise, right? We wanted to have a little interactive stuff going on here. So, in just a second, this is very simple. I'm going to ask you to pick a partner, not yet, and preferably somebody you don't know. And when I say go, the first person is going to continue a story that I'm going to begin with a few lines that paint a scenario. So the first person is going to take that scenario and start telling their version of what happens next. And then I'm going to say switch, and the second person will pick up the story, and I'll say switch, and then the first person picks up the story and switch, etc. You're smart, you get it, right? Very simple. Any questions about the instruction? Right? You all have to do this now. right? You can't, no opting out. So pick a partner, just eye contact somebody, preferably somebody you don't know. And here's the scenario. All right, so we're doing networking already. So here's the scenario, okay? We're sitting in the San Antonio Convention Center at Breakthroughs when all of a sudden there was a massive flash of light that pierced through the door, and there was a sound of a heavenly choir and a rumble of thunder. Go. Switch. 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 And switch. Last switch. And stop. Okay. Now, we could spend an hour debriefing this because it's actually a very rich exercise. What I wanted to do is to prove to all of you that you actually are good jazz musicians, or to make it more generic, you know how to improvise. Because I imagine that each of you didn't know from minute to minute, second to second, 30 seconds to 30 seconds what was going to happen next. So you had to listen to the other person, you had to establish some rapport. I noticed the volume level kind of went up. Presumably people were getting into the groove. There was more humor and playfulness. There was, a shift in the mode of interaction. And I imagine that the stories were pretty interesting. If we had time, we would debrief them. But, here's the point. You've had practice all your lives being in a conversation. You know the difference between a good conversation and a bad conversation. Just like, when you're in a business meeting, meeting some new partner in your ecosystem, you know the difference between when you're really connecting with them and when there's a little bit of opaqueness, or, you're not quite sure what's going on. And then you may or may not be aware of this, but you've developed a repertoire of conversational skills that allow you to diagnose what's going on, see, read body language, intervene, shift the nature of the conversation, try different things out, et cetera, et cetera. So we're all experts at conversation, right? We may not be experts at playing jazz piano because that involves a somewhat more technical skill. So my point, which I want to ingrain inside of each one of you in a very basic way, is that innovation isn't just some ethereal mood or, corporate culture, strategy. It's actually about developing capabilities. It's about things that you practice over long periods of time, that once you practice them, you get good at them. So they're capabilities. They're not wishes, right? They're not wishes. If I found Durrell somewhere in the audience and I said, okay, oh, there he is, and it's not really going to happen. But let's say I said, there's an extra event after my talk, and it's quite simple. You're going to play a jazz piano concert. And I'm going to do all the things that a good manager does, right? I'm going to encourage you. I'm going to tell you that you can succeed. I'm going to pat you on the back. I'm going to give you a sheet of paper that tells you where to put all your fingers on the keys. I'm going to make sure they keep this really nice piano here. Everybody's going to stay. We're going to applaud a lot. We're going to talk about the culture of innovation that makes it possible for you to do this and show where it's in the corporate value statement. And what's my point? My point is that unless he's been practicing in secret for 10 years, I mean, he's kind of smart, so we'll say 5 years. But, you know, right? Doing that, or, you know, jazz scale. You got to practice to do that. And then you can begin to do your thing. Now, you've practiced conversation, so you know how to improvise, right? So a lot of what I'm going to say, hopefully, is going to build on this experience over the next 30 minutes or so that we have left in our time together. So innovation, to me, is about capabilities. It's not about moods or wishes. You know, jazz musicians don't get on stage and rub chicken bones together and pray that some note is going to come out of their instrument. It's a job. They get up on stage, count off, play new notes, right? And then hopefully the audience is going to buy their CD and stay in the jazz club and buy drinks and do all that kind of stuff. But it's more than that. It's about capabilities that enable the continuous realization of a desired future. So innovation to me is not just a campaign. It's not just something you do once. It's something you have to do over and over again. And it has to be about something. It has to be about achieving a future that you want, something that you desire, whether it's for you individually or for your company or for your industry or your industry ecosystem, whatever it might be. Otherwise, you know, innovation is just generating new stuff, which is sort of okay, but if you have a sense of a desired future, then innovation is linked to purpose, and then it becomes really powerful and meaningful. So we want to talk about important things, right? Okay, so I'm going to focus on a few basic questions. I'm going to talk a little bit more about what it is, because if you can extract from these comments a point of view about innovation that allows you to communicate with other people more effectively about it, so it isn't just the hand-waving stuff, then I will feel like this has been a successful talk and a successful interaction. I'm going to talk a bit about why it's important, and then I'm going to talk mostly for the balance of my time about how to do it. Right? Pretty big agenda for 26 minutes. First of all, what? So everybody's got a map in their head as to what innovation is, which makes it difficult to communicate. This is a map, just to show the power of maps, of showing California as an island off the coast of North America. It's actually a real Spanish sailing map, so, you know, lots of luck, right? But although some people still believe this is true. I live in San Francisco now, so I think I can speak with authority on that subject. You know, if somebody says innovation, you've got to find out what they mean, right? It could be reverse innovation, where you're bringing stuff from the developing world to the first world. Like, you know, why is GE doing all these healthcare projects in rural India, right? Because, you know, if the portable EKG machine, which costs $1,000, works in rural India with crummy, you know, power grid and all, and, you know, difficult conditions, you'd be an idiot not to buy it for San Antonio or New York City, right? Open source and digital, I mean, this is all about enabling collaboration, crowdsourcing, bottom up, you know. Large scale, which you can blame me for, is the whole attempt to reinvent this idea of how innovation works in a society like America or Finland or China, right? User-centered and design thinking. This is very important. Innovation comes from different places. It could come from the lab, it could come from an engineer. Increasingly, it comes from behavioral scientists. You know, even in healthcare, the user experience, you know, is part of the magic that encourages people to get better, right? And people who understand that in terms of designing the service experience and the physical environment within which that service experience occurs, you know, and all that stuff around you're going to get better, have a leg up on people who are simply technocrats and are, you know, handing out pills or, you know, objective therapies. Not that those are not crucially important, but that there's more to the story, right? Indigenous innovation, just an example of globalization of innovation. China's national innovation strategy, they focus on indigenous innovation, and they put $500 billion to work on their innovation strategy, right? So innovation's real stuff, real money. And then finally, just a plug for the whole sustainability movement. Many companies and also countries increasingly are looking at their innovation agendas and their sustainability agendas as being the same thing, right? You need sustainability, you have to be innovative. You develop innovation capabilities, you groom them based on a sustainability agenda, which is kind of interesting. Okay, the other reason that it's complicated to talk about innovation is because the models of innovation are evolving. You know, we start with innovation out of the Industrial Revolution. You know, learning curve, manufacturing, Kaizen, improvement, incremental innovation, right? But then we move to Silicon Valley in the beginning of the 60s with disruptive innovation and killer apps and Silicon Valley and venture capital and startup nation, right? In the 60s, right? And then we have user-centered innovation, which is design thinking, you know, government 2.0, you know, all of the stuff that starts with human experience and then builds outward. Now, this is not a linear sequence. I mean, obviously, Apple is good at all of these. You know, Tim Cook is referred to as the Darth Vader of supply chain. They were intimately involved in creating Silicon Valley as we know it today. But they also understand what people are going to love. You know, Steve Jobs famously got up on stage to talk about the iPod, and he didn't say this is the 73rd MP3 player that's been created, just better, which it was. But he came out and he said, this is 1,000 songs in your pocket. And everybody promptly forgot about the other 72 MP3 players. He didn't come out and say, well, this is an Intel chip, and it's, you know, kind of case-hardened plastic, and, you know, it's kind of got these dials. Technocratic stuff. He focused on the experience, right? So Apple blends all of these things together, right? And companies and industries have choices, right? Healthcare has choices. You know, healthcare is increasingly moving in the direction of user experience, behavioral science, design, et cetera. But there's clearly a lot more that can be done in that area, in my humble opinion. Also, you know, innovation is complex because it involves people, it involves teams, it involves companies, and it involves geographies. And so to really understand it, I mean, you got to understand psychology, interpersonal behavior, leadership, organizational behavior, corporate strategy, macroeconomics, you know, national policies around it. I mean, it's complicated, right? So when somebody says, I'm interested in innovation, the best thing you can do is to ask this question, which is composed of 4 words. What do you mean? And then you can have a really good conversation. But before that, I don't think you can, right? All right, why is it important? 1 down, 2 to go. Well, first of all, it pays. I'm not going to bore you with all of the analysis, but if you look up innovation premium, if you just Google that, the delta between the discounted cash flows in a company's operations and the premium that people are willing to pay for it in the equity markets is now increasingly used as a research device to demonstrate that companies that invest heavily in innovation are rewarded by superior stock price performance. So that's the so-called innovation premium. It's also important because, you know, frankly, we're in this kind of dark period in a lot of industries, to say nothing of the global condition. You know, this is my favorite wild man, anarchist philosopher, Antonio Gramsci, who in his famous prison diary said, we are in a difficult transition. The crisis consists precisely in the fact that the old is dying and the new cannot be born. In this interregnum, a great deal of morbid symptoms appear. Interregnum is an interesting word, referring back to Roman times. So I don't know if you're, you know, how you are in Roman history, but, you know, when the emperor died in Rome, all of the laws were suspended until the new emperor was elected, and that was called the interregnum, and that's why, you know, you had all these bloody, you know, kind of transitions. And it seems as though, from a business perspective, from a, you know, global perspective, we're in a number of different interregnums, and as Steve Jobs once famously said, we're in deep trouble. We just have to innovate our way out of here. So innovation's important for that reason as well, because, you know, I don't know how many of you saw this somewhat cheesy film last year, Elysium, but, you know, we don't want to wind up in a world where all of the rich people are living up here with life extension and endless cable TV offerings, while everybody else is down here on a garbage heap, which is what the Earth has become. You know, and we're kind of at a number of different tipping points which deserve careful consideration. So it's important. How do you do it? Well, I talked about capability development, which really requires one to think about practice. How are you going to do it? So piano is obvious. You get down there and you practice, right, for half an hour, 2 hours, and you try to do it every day, right? You get into a routine. Practice is very important. Malcolm Gladwell has this famous, well, it's not his idea. He popularized the idea of the 10,000 hours, right? So to get mastery of something, you have to do it for 10,000 hours, right? So think about, what have you done for 10,000 hours that's developed a focal skill? What has your company done for the equivalent of 10,000 hours to develop capabilities for innovation, right? I mean, you can't just wish for these things, right? I mean, of course, you have to know that you want them and you have to have a sense of what you want, but then you have to do the work. Thelonious Monk was once, he's a jazz, god, for those of you that haven't heard his name before, and he was once asked by a young jazz pianist, how can I sound better? How can I get better? And Monk said, it's simple, man. You just take a tune you love and you play it 500 times a day. And this guy said, okay, I can do that. And by the way, Mr. Monk, what's next? And Monk said, look, you don't get it. Just go and do it 500 times a day. And that's the magic of practice. The more you do, the more you see into the skill set, the more you develop something that becomes strategic, right? So there are a lot of innovation capabilities that you could develop through practice. When I want to irritate senior people, I'll often say, well, so what are the capabilities you have in your organization for innovation that you've invested a lot of time and effort in that are strategic for your organization? And typically, more often than not, the answer is, I don't know. Or, they'll talk to somebody else on their staff and say, what have we got? Because their job is like the chief cheerleader, not the chief capability builder. But these are all examples of innovation capabilities. Developing the capability for design and customer insight, basic science, tech transfer, process skills, actually doing the work at an intimate scale, developing partnerships, participating in ecosystems, environmental sensing and knowledge building. I mean, most companies and organizations I know have a huge we don't know what we know problem. They also have a we don't know what we don't know problem, right? Digital, crowdsourcing, social media. This is moving faster than you could possibly imagine. I mean, I'm deeply into it, and I'm learning a dozen new things a week that I didn't know about. New companies, new pieces of software, new business models. Communicating for effect. If you want activism, if you want people to be doing the work of innovation in your organization, you have to motivate them. You have to give them a reason for doing it. And narrative and storytelling become very important as enablers of that. Strategic foresight, being able to imagine the future. Skunkworks, thinking about platforms for doing disruptive innovation that are outside of the mainstream. Venture capital perspective, can you think like a venture capitalist to invest in new things? And finally, if you want innovation, you got to have people who know how to do it. And if you want people who know how to do it, you better think about how you're going to teach them a bit about how to do that. How are they going to learn how to do it besides, just banging into things and making a bunch of mistakes? And this is by no means an exhaustive list. This is just, what I did with a bunch of coffee, a cup of coffee. But, you need to figure out your own list and then figure out what's feasible and affordable and doable for you, and then do your 10,000 hours. Or guess what? You're not going to have innovation capabilities. You'll have innovation moods, and maybe the other guy will have innovation capabilities, and that wouldn't be such a pretty story, would it? Okay, so how do people in jazz learn? This is a very famous picture. It's Thelonious Monk and Lester Young, and Minton's was a place where the jazz musicians would go after their regular gig and jam until dawn, right? And these were called cutting sessions. Cutting sessions, not tea parties. Cutting sessions, as in, we're going to play together and I hope you can keep up. Or, I'm going to be so much better than you, I'm going to blow you off the stage. Not in an aggressive way, but just because, it was a hermetic art, right? So I'm really good, and, you come up on stage, maybe you're good too. Maybe we'll discover something. But the key thing is we're going to put ourselves on the line and actually discover this by doing it. We're not going to intellectualize about it or think we might do it or talk about doing it. We're actually just going to get up and blow. and either we're going to do it or we're not going to do it, right? So, you know, you think about how that works. You know, Mulgrew Miller, another jazz great, said they learned by being on the bandstand and getting their rear ends kicked. He didn't say rear ends. And being embarrassed and going home and just trying to figure it all out, right? So where in your organization do people stand up and put themselves on the line with new ideas in a jam session environment? It certainly doesn't happen in schools. You know, my big thing right now is trying to reimagine middle and high school education and try to help kids become innovators and entrepreneurs kind of ahead of the schedule of grown-ups. And, you know, kids by and large, you know, they go to school, they listen to teachers, they read books, they memorize facts, they take tests, and then they're told, well, maybe you can get into college now. And then, of course, a lot of them these days graduate from college and can't find a job because guess what? They didn't get trained to do anything that was, you know, particularly useful that had to do with collaboration or project management or entrepreneurial skills or innovation skills, right? You know, the Scouts' virtues, right? I was a Scout, believe it or not. Trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. What does clean have to do with it? Obedient, right? I mean, you know, sounds good. I'd rather have that than not have it. Doesn't equip you for the 21st century. So, jazz musicians understand a lot about context. Context meaning where the work of creativity happens. Charlie Parker was famous for going to the woodshed behind his house for a long time, where he developed this new language of jazz called bebop. And to this day, you know, if you say to a young jazz musician, so, you know, you've been in the woodshed recently, they might forgive you for your clumsy question, but they'll know exactly what you mean. Except these days, the 20-year-olds call it shedding, as in, I've been shedding, you know, meaning I've been practicing a lot in isolation because I don't want, not only do I not want negative feedback, I don't want positive, I don't want any feedback, right? I just want to be alone, right? So, the reason why we have this little skunk here is because Lockheed in the 30s decided they were going to create a woodshed. They called it the Skunk Works. And that's where they built all these visionary airplanes, starting with the P-38, you know, the plane with the two fuselages that looked like it could never fly, all the way to the SR-71, which is the titanium-clad plane retired some time ago that flies faster than a .38 caliber bullet. This was all done by people who were essentially kicked out of the mainstream and forced to work in the woodshed on their own, right? So jazz musicians have understood context for a long time. And you know, that's the SR-71 in the Air and Space Museum. But, you know, now here are woodsheds globally. This is Singapore's life sciences complex, the Biopolis. This is the Skolkovo Foundation in Moscow. You know, the Russians are building this innovation city 50 kilometers outside of Moscow. Multi-gazillion dollar project. You know, good luck. But, you know, these are big budget attempts to create new kinds of platforms on which a different level of innovation activity can occur. So it's interesting. And it's happening globally. You know, H.G. Wells talked about the global brain, the world brain. You know, he's a really smart guy. This book, which, you know, it's a little hard to find, you know, he talked about what has since become Wikipedia. He talked about all the world's information at your fingertips, you know, before Google in 1938, for Pete's sake. And now, you've got this world. This is an illustration from an HBR article I wrote some time ago. The colors don't mean anything, but the size of the countries means a lot, which is to say there are many countries in the innovation game. The size of the country is based on an index that I created of innovation capability and strength. And, you know, the U.S., which used to be the only game in town, is now one of many. And also little countries like Israel, Singapore, Finland can loom big in the global innovation landscape. So, you know, innovation, hotspots, woodsheds, they're happening all over the place. Jazz musicians understand how to find the sweet spot. They understand how to reconcile creative tensions. You know, in music and in business, you might say, well, there's at one extreme, and by the way, improvisation is not playing whatever you want, right? This is playing whatever you want. You know, that was very creative, but I very much doubt that anybody here is going to go out and buy that CD. But, you know, I don't think anybody's going to buy this CD either. Right? So, you have freedom, absolute structure, and in the middle you've got jazz. And jazz has a grammar, just like business has a grammar. You know, I mean, this chord progression, the most fundamental in music. And this chord part of it, cadence we call it technically, is so perfect that it's actually nicknamed in the music trade the amen cadence, because, you know, there's something kind of very special about it. So you've heard this a million times, right? I mean, this is the foundation of classical music and church music. But it's also this kind of music. So listen to this. Same bones, right? Or if you're, I know I'm in San Antonio, so if your tastes go to rockabilly or something like that. Same bones, right? And you violate those principles at your peril, right? I mean, if I go, that doesn't sound too good, right? I mean, it's not resolved, right? I mean, there's this famous story about Bach, who had students who were kind of mischievous, and one night after he went to bed, they went down to the piano and they started playing and they improvised something. And then they left. And about an hour later, Bach comes down in his nightshirt and he goes, we all need a little resolution, right? All right. So these are some of the tensions in music, right? Sheet music versus random notes, but there's also tensions that have to do with your daily experience of innovation and being in business, being in the world of affairs, planning versus letting things emerge, safety versus risk-taking, the past versus the future, evidence versus intuition, right? How many times have you heard somebody say, well, just show me the numbers, show me the evidence. How do you know that's going to be possible, right? Sometimes you just don't know. So jazz musicians understand how to find the sweet spot, right? The sweet spot is something you discover in the moment based on where you are in the music. It's not something you can kind of deduce from a set of analytical principles or an algorithm. It's a skill. Just like a leader knows, you know, I've got to push more because we got to, you know, kind of get back to the fundamentals and be more disciplined. Or they say, you know, we're getting kind of stale. We need to open things up a little bit. And there's no algorithm that tells that person how to do that. They basically have their own kind of intuition and mental map that allows them to find the sweet spot too. So, so what? I'm mindful of the time here. So what? I have a few ideas I want to share with you. First of all, sustaining innovation is a big challenge. You know, doing it is one thing, keeping it and growing it is another. So experience shows you need a sense of purpose. That's the North Star. That's why you do it. The purpose has to be expressed in a vision, which is nothing more or less than a picture of the desired future. Right? I know a lot of you have been trapped into vision processes, and maybe it's been a little, I don't know, maybe it's been great. But, you know, vision is nothing more or less than, you know, seeing it before you're there, so you can kind of know where you're going. Having a story, narrative, right? Having a strategy, what you're going to do, what you're not going to do with what resources based on who's responsible. Not rocket science, right? Stewardship, who's going to be responsible for innovation besides the CEO? Right? CEO's job is Chief Innovation Officer by default. But who's actually going to be responsible for being the steward of the strategy, making things happen? Well, not clear, right? In a lot of organizations. Do you have tangible processes that you've invested in? Things that you know how to do that are actually the work of innovation? Could be the skunk works, the user lab, you know, whatever. But what are the tangible processes? And have you made long-term bets? Because the best way to sustain innovation, whether it's in a company or a country, is by saying, well, we're doing a moonshot, right? We're doing a big project. It's going to be bigger than the tenure of office of a leader. It's going to be woven deeply into the roots of the organization. And then, you know, learning. How are you going to help your people to learn how to do this, right? And then, of course, there's culture. But culture, to me, it's necessary but not, you know, it's necessary but not sufficient. Narrative is interesting. You know, a lot of organizations, to me, don't really know how to tell stories that are pungent, that arouse a sense of urgency and a sense of activism. It's real different telling people the content of a story versus giving them the experience that makes them want to change their behavior. You know, Aristotle said that the purpose of drama was to achieve a shift in moral perspective that was so profound that you would want to change your life. And isn't that what we want in organizations? We want change, right? We want positive change. So we need stories. We need beginner's mind. I talked about getting up on the piano and not knowing what I was going to play. The music sounds better the less I know. Now, that doesn't mean you shouldn't know things. But at the moment of creation, having preconceptions can get in the way. The Zen Buddhists say, in the mind of the beginner, in the mind of the expert, there are many opinions. In the mind of the beginner, there are few opinions. And therefore, all new things begin with beginner's mind. Right? Very powerful. Most organizations I know don't know how to get to beginner's mind. Most people don't know how to get to beginner's mind because they've developed themselves based on what they know, which is fine. But at the moment of creation, you know, if all you're doing is, you know, the behavioral scientists call this looking under the lamppost. You know, it's the guy looking for his keys under the lamppost, and the cop comes over and says, what are you doing? I'm looking for my keys. Where did you lose them? Over there. Why are you here? Because the light's on here, right? I mean, it's a well-known behavioral science dilemma and phenomenon. Lots of innovative, non-obvious business models. You know, I should actually have a picture of an Uber car here because they now are supposedly going to be valued at they are valued now at over $18 billion. It's basically a website to, you know, call people who own their own cars to come and pick you up. $18 billion, more than Avis and Hertz combined, and they actually own tangible assets. Right? So this whole share economy thing, very significant. Competition from insurgents. Apple continues hiring raid on medical sensor field as it develops eye scanning technology. And, you know, they're all doing it. Google's doing it. Samsung's doing it. Wearable devices with health IT functions poised to disrupt medicine. This is the, you know, this is Main Street speaking. This is the end user. This is all the people that bought, you know, Fitbits when they were not such great devices and are poised to buy the new wave of Apple, you know, medical sensor products and other things, and kind of take control back from the professionals, or at least share control with professionals. And, you know, it seems like a fairly innocuous thing of, oh, okay, so it's a little scanning device. But this is the beginning of something really big. And, you know, arguably Apple, this is not the Apple Watch, but it's a prototype. But, you know, they know a lot about putting technology on the body, more than, you know, a lot of incumbents in the healthcare space. So there's a lot of disruption coming along, and you know, if you think about what Apple is good at, they're actually quite well positioned to take a major position in this emerging area. I'm just going to close with one observation, which is that to me, the reason to be optimistic about the future in a sort of problematic time, and also to be optimistic about the future of innovation is young people. So about 15 months ago, I started a company called EdgeMakers, which is, whose mission is to empower young people to innovate and make a difference in the world. It's a K through 12 curriculum. It's an online platform. It's a bunch of things. It's a lot of bells and whistles. I think that the idealism and passion and creativity of kids is one of the most underutilized and misused assets on the planet right now. And to prove it, I'll just close with this little vignette here. This is Vivian Har. Just introduce you to her. So Vivian is, hi, I'm an edge maker. She's an edge maker. When she was 8, she saw an exhibition on child slavery. She's a very privileged Northern California girl, right? She was very upset. She told her parents, I'm going to do something about child slavery. They said, great. What are you going to do? She said, well, I'm going to raise enough money to free 500 kids. And there are these charities where, you know, if you pay $200, they buy these indentured contracts out and then the kids go free, right? Nepal, terrible, right? So they said, well, you know, that's a lot of money. That's about $100,000. How are you going to do that? She said, well, the one thing I know how to do is make lemonade. And they said, well, you know, that's a lot of lemonade, but go ahead. So she set up a stand behind her house, and she put up a sign that said, pay what's in your heart. So initially she got $1 and you know, here and $1 there and then more, and then people started to understand that this was a cause, so they would drop 20 bucks in or they would write her a check, and it became a little bit of a thing, right? To the point where Nicholas Kristof tweeted about her to his 1 million followers, and she raised $100,000 in 5 months. Then she proceeded to raise $1 million over the next 6 months. And now she's 9. She's old. And her parents said to her, well, you know, you can stop now. You know, and she said something very inspiring to me, and I hope to you, which is, I want to know, is child slavery over? Is child slavery done? And her parents said, well, sorry, no, it's not. And she said, well, I'm not done. And there are thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of kids like her who haven't been told that they can be innovative, they can be entrepreneurs, and that they can change the world. So that is my current preoccupation, along with hanging out with groups like yours and hopefully adding a little bit of knowledge and maybe a little bit of sparkle into what I know is going to be a great meeting for all of you. So with that, thank you very much for having me, and all the best.